All right. What did we learn last week? How are we feeling heading into our last week of HTML?
A lot better.
Okay.
With a
How so?
couple of days to practice, I'm learning how to use when to use certain concepts, like when to use my container fluid or my container, or just put like just use my dev classes in a row.
Hmm.
I don't know. I was having a rough time with that. I was like, man, there's so many different ways that you got to use this stuff. So I was getting lost in the concepts.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to get lost because it's all a div, right? And you're like, well, how can I lay out a site if my only option is a div? But then you start layering in and understanding that, well, I've got things in boxes all over my house, but that doesn't make everything that that box is holding the same thing, right? And so that's when you get into using those classes and saying, okay, well, there are classes that Bootstrap has already made for me that I can learn, and that I can use and I don't have to make myself. But then there's also that CSS, right, where I can start going in and applying my own properties. And that's really when it gets into it, it gets very overwhelming to do an entire website, and it gets really frustrating when you just miss that first div and everything is off, right? And so that's when it really gets into, hey, let me do my prep work, right? Let me do my outline before I dive into this. And so that way I have something I can kind of hold on to as we're going. But also, when you get into your code, taking that approach of, okay, am I a person who does the layout first and gets everything in place and then goes in and adds in the content? Or am I someone who works better by componentizing, right? By just focusing on one entire section before I move on to the next area of the website. And there's no one right answer there. Some people work better when they have just a smaller end goal in sight. Other people work better when the entire site is kind of laid out, which makes it easier to focus in and get that content in place. So those are two very helpful techniques, but all important to keep in mind here that you're not going to be an HTML expert at the end of this, but hopefully you're starting to see that between the layout and the CSS properties that we're using, you can really make almost any website with the skills that you guys now have exposure to. Was there anything else from last week that stuck out? I do appreciate you guys filling out the 30-second feedback form. I think I got 15 different responses there. I read through all of them, mostly on Thursday night, and a couple more came in today. So I thank you for that. The vast majority of the feedback was just more projects. I did get one submission that said, no more free code camp, please. Which is a love-hate relationship. Either Free Code Camp is a really great resource for you, and because they break it down into smaller pieces, it can be a really great learning resource, or you hate it, right? And you're like, this just does not make sense to me. I don't get the way they explain it. And that's okay, right? We don't have any homework assignments that are required free code camp. Those are just a resource for you to get more practice. But there are lots of other resources out there for you to use. Okay. Anything else from last week that stood out? Anything that we want to talk about? Anything that you're still struggling with? Yes, Cornelius.
Yeah, I'd like to say the pop quiz definitely showcase probably various areas of what people need to work on. Or like for myself in particular, like I know what I want to do in program, but the thing is I like to comment everything. Always like comment. I've been told throughout my college experience coding, always comment your code because whoever checks it out wants to know what does what. So that's been my hold up, but also learning curve on is because you like when someone wants something done, they expect it to focus on trying to get it done, not just spend a little bit of time commenting. They just want to see the work done again in an hour. They don't want to see an hour of you just commenting and just doing a little bit of the work.
Yeah, commenting is really a tough balance to strike because you know, you definitely don't want to be commenting every single line of your code. You want to be leaving in comments that are helpful to other people. The problem with that is it depends who those other people are, right? Are they coming in as beginners? Have they never written a line of HTML before? Or are they coming in with senior development experience, right? And they can make sites like this one, you know, in a blink of an eye. And so comments are really hard because you definitely don't want to be commenting every line, but little things like, hey, this is the end of this particular div can be helpful. So you really want to ask yourself when you're writing inline comments, and we'll start doing that more in our JavaScript to make sure that we get an understanding of that code. When you're writing those comments, you have to kind of factor in, hey, are these comments for me? Am I the only one who's going to be seeing this code? And at which point it becomes an exercise of, can I describe this code in basically English, right? Or the flip side of that is, or am I writing these comments for someone else? And I would encourage you to prioritize those comments for understanding throughout the boot camp. But when you get your senior development jobs, that is something to consider when you're commenting. Over commenting is definitely better than under commenting, but there is such a thing as over explaining, at least in professional production code. Anything else from last week?
I like that, like doing the setting up our profiles, like our blogs. Um, Seeing like I forgot what the site we use to get the different color coordinations, but that seems like a helpful tool because,
Coolers.
yep,
Yes, coolers.
yeah, that seemed like a helpful tool because you don't think about what colors you want to do for the website. You're mostly just about either getting functional, but with that like then at the end you're just like, oh, what color scheme do I want to go with? That's a successful website tool.
Absolutely. And we'll be using more tools as we go. I will be peppering them in. So that is a good one to call out. Oftentimes we don't think, or when we think about colors, we think about colors in a silo and we think, oh, this one color looks good. What we don't exercise is how does this color work or look compared to the other colors I'll be using on the website. So for colors in particular, they tend to say pick 5 colors and stick to those. Oftentimes you'll get to a website and it has too many colors going on, but making sure that that palette kind of goes together. If you think about painting a room in your house, if you had a different color on every wall, people would think you were nuts, right? The same kind of goes for a website. So limiting that color selection down is definitely a good priority. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into our code tonight. We are going to be working on the portfolio site all night. I am going to head to my code folder. I promise one of these days I will clean up my desktop so it does not look like someone threw up on it. But until then, I'm going to head to my week 3, my day 4 code. I'm going to go ahead and copy that as our starting point. Just Command C to copy that folder, make sure the folder is selected and not the files. I'm going to go back up to my code level and create a new folder called week 4. And once I am in my week 4, I'm going to go ahead and paste in that day 4 folder from last week. And then I'm going to rename that day 1. Do not forget to rename that so that you do not get confused on day 4 this week. And then I am going to go ahead and drag that into my VS Code. From there, I am going to go live before I forget. This is where we left off with our just our first section done, nothing underneath it. And I will start a go live for you guys and drop that in the chat. Reminder to open a new window and then copy and paste that link in. Don't just click on it unless clicking on it works for you. And then in that case, that is totally fine. I'm going to get my live server shared. open my index and my style. I will throw my style down in the second half as usual. And I will wait for you guys to get all set up.
Favorite a folder.
I actually don't. In Finder, I don't think it's possible, and I'm not sure in VS Code. VS Code usually I just work off recents.
Alrighty. It's funny because there's like actually a favorite section, but you don't get to decide your favorites.
Oh, interesting. Where do you see favorites?
Oh, in Finder, yeah, not in VS Code.
Oh. In Finder, you can like tag things with different colors, and then you can filter those colors over on the left. But for these favorites, you can choose them. All you need to do is grab the folder and drag and drop it into place, and that will add it into the favorites.
Oh, there we go. All right, cool. Will it still be in the original location? Or
Yes,
is
it
that like
doesn't
a
move it. It's
okay.
just like a shortcut to it.
Cool. Thank you.
Of course. All right, everyone good? Everyone got their folder set up. Everyone in the live share, everyone got their live server up and running. Does anyone not have their site looking like this and need a little help to get caught up before we dive into new code tonight? Reminder that if you guys get stuck at some point, if you're frustrated, if you're missing a div and it's preventing you from moving on, get past the shyness and ask for help, right? Because this boot camp is not just about learning the skills, it's also learning the skill of debugging, right? Debugging is something that is not going to go away in your professional career. And yes, even me gets to the point where I'm like, I cannot take this anymore. I've been staring at this for hours. I cannot figure out what is wrong. And I will go to a coworker, and within 30 seconds, they will find the problem, and I will feel like a complete idiot. That is part of programming, right? So that is a skill that you build up, you get better at, but you will not get better at debugging if you don't practice doing it. So I've been doing these projects for a while. That's why it goes smoothly when I do it. You've caught me a couple times where I get hung up and have to fix things, not just on a typo, but on a layout going wrong. I want you guys to feel comfortable asking for help, right? Building that debugging skill is not going to happen unless you practice it. So if you are at any point and you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling like you just need a little boost, if you're like, I swear I'm doing everything right and I can't figure out what is wrong, please, please, please share your screen, because that is the only way that you guys are going to get better, not only at your HTML, but your JavaScript and all of these concepts as we go. Okay, with all of that said, I'm going to pop open our reference website. Don't let me forget about CSS animation. If we don't get to it today, we will get to it tomorrow. That is the way to make it so when we refresh the page, it kind of fades in like that. We will get to that next. But I want to move on to the next section of the website down here, which is this about. And the first thing that I notice about this is, pun not intended there, is that if I expand my screen all the way out, that is still inside the container, right? It's getting constrained in because it's very text heavy. So because of that, I know that I need to be inside of my container fluid. So I am going to scroll down until I find my container fluid. Get these out of the way. I don't have this labeled, and I probably should. So if you're using color blocks, that is totally fine. But I'm going to click on that and see that that is indeed the closing for my container. So I'm going to say end of main site container. We are using semantic HTML instead of just divs for everything. And because this website is broken up into sections so clearly, I am going to make a new section tag. And chances are I'm going to need to style this at some point. So I will proactively put an ID on that. This is going to be our about section. Before I forget, I can put an end of about section in here. And now I can get to work on my content. So I know I've got the word about up here. And then I've got all of this text in here, right? So I'm going to come in here. I am going to make that an H1 because it's probably the biggest headline section. And then I am going to put in a P tag for the content. So what we can do, there's actually a lorem ipsum shortcut. Let me see if I can remember it.
No doggo ipsum.
Doggo ipsum is fine. It's just not built into VS Code. So lorem ipsum, if you've never heard of it, is not only random placeholder text, it is text that has a certain number of every character, so that when you're playing around with fonts, you can actually see how big the content will fill up based off of a bunch of different letters. So if you type in the word lorem, LOREM, all in lowercase, and hit enter, it will automatically just drop in a paragraph of text, of lorem ipsum text. There are lorem ipsum generators out there, so if you just do a search for lorem ipsum, you can say, oh, I want 5 paragraphs of lorem ipsum, and it will generate it for you. However, I do encourage you to go back here and replace this. Having lorem ipsum on your portfolio site in general is a pretty bad look. So you can see what I've put in here, just a couple quick sentences. You don't want anything too long. When people are going to your portfolio website, they're not there to read a biography about you, but it is nice to give a little bit of context about yourself. So I just typed in, again, the word lorem inside this P tag. I hit enter. That put in a couple sentences for me. And now I can see what it looks like. I'm going to scroll down and I can barely see it. The reason I can barely see it is because my text is in black here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, how do I want to go about fixing that in my CSS? It looks like if I scroll through my example website, the majority of my text is in white. So I've got two options. I can either change the color in each section, or I could target something all the way up at the body tag and make all the text on the page white. I don't think it matters too much here. So let's just target it in the actual section. So I am going to go down to the bottom of my CSS file. I'm going to target my about section. And I'm going to go ahead and make that color white. And now I can actually see my about section. But clearly have a lot of work to do there, right? There's a big jump between this and this. So the first thing that I notice is that background color. So if you have your coolers, I recommended that we put a comment in our CSS, but I think I forgot to do it when we were working with our coolers. So if you still have your coolers open, you can go ahead and do that. A quick note here that commenting in every language is a little different. Some languages do use the same syntax, like CSS and JavaScript use the same syntax for a multi-line comment. But you will see here that our comments in HTML are the exclamation point with the dash dash, compared to our CSS, which uses a /* at the beginning and then a */ at the end. So VS Code is usually pretty good about remembering that syntax. But if you command / and you've got the right file extension, VS Code will know usually what kind of comment to put in. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to go down to my about section. If you have your hex color in coolers, you are welcome to use that color. If not, you are welcome to use the name of any color in here. So you could put that in as, color olive, and it would actually turn to a green color. So feel free to pick whatever color you would like for your background. Just make sure that the text is going to be the right level of contrast. I grabbed the wrong color. I want to use this one. And just like that, I've got my background color in. The div is roughly sized the way that I want. The only problem is that text should never really be right up to the edge of a div, especially if that div has a background on it. So we can fix that by saying, hey, let's throw some padding of 30 pixels. And just like that, we've got our first about section in place. Why padding instead of margin? Because I want that to be inside the border, right? I want that to be inside the background color. If I was trying to move the about section further down from a section above it or below it, I would use margin. And maybe I bump that up a little bit. Maybe I target my P tag and say font size, let's try 16 pixels. That's a little bit better. And just like that, we've got our first about. No, let's go up to 20. And just like that, we've got our about section rocking and rolling. Hopefully an easy intro for that, because the form section is about to get a little bit more challenging. Okie doke. Let's continue on here. So get my reference. The next section is contact, and I'm looking at contact and I'm going, all right. First thing I notice is that we've got columns going on here, and we've got columns on columns going on here. The contact section, maybe not in a column, but we've got this left and right going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my layout first and make sure I get all of my divs nested right before I dive into getting the content actually loaded up. So I need to come outside of my section and make a new section. The ID will be contact. And then I'm going to get my layout going on. So I will do an H1 with the word contact. And then I'm going to look at this and I'm going to go, all right, I got things on the left and I got things on the right. And they look like they're evenly split between the two of those. So that to me says, all right, I got to start with a row because we can never use columns without our containing row. And then I'm going to say, all right, I need two columns. One will be a col 6 that will say text. And the other one will be another col 6 that says form. And we want to be careful there, making sure that we've got this col 6 outside of this col 6, but still inside of the row. And because I know this may get a little messy as we start adding things inside of it, I'm going to add in my comments before I forget and say end of left col of contact section. And I will add another one that says end of right col of contact section. And then maybe I'll say form in there. Remember, the exact comments don't matter. It's just so you know where we're at. And I will even throw one more in here that says end of row for contact section. All right. I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to make sure that my rows are looking good. I'm like, oh, here we go again. That text is in gray or in black, and I can't really see it. So let's clean up our background. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to target my contact section. I'm going to throw my background color in. And I'm just going to keep working off my coolers palette. You do not have to follow me here. Or you can if you'd like to take my colors. That's totally fine. I'm going to get my color, my font color in white, and I'm going to get my padding showing up on this section. I will save that. I will come over here. Now I've got my contact, my text, and my form. My layout's good. My padding's good. I've got it on the left and the right. And so I'm feeling pretty good about where all of that is showing up. The head's moving, so I'll give you guys one more minute and then we will get that content loaded in.
Sorry, I just want to make sure. Did you add anything to the CSS for this or?
Yeah, in the CSS, we just set the background, the font color, and the padding.
Okay, thank you.
And again, this is what we should be looking like, making sure that our content is flowing. And we're going to get div soup going on here. We're going to get a lot of divs nested in each other here. So because of that, we want to make sure that we're being good with our comments here, making sure we know where we are inside of. All right, let's dive in here for the content. I'm going to just take this right off. Want to get in touch? It says shoot me an email or fill out the form. So I'm going to copy that and paste that in. But one thing that I noticed on my website is I've got this email link. And if I click on it, it will actually pop open my email client and let me and actually start composing an email to me. So to do that, we're going to target our email here with an anchor tag. So we'll put that anchor tag in. The anchor tags work by whatever is in between them will show up as the text that the end user sees. But then anchor tags like our links tag take an href. And we've seen hrefs before where we can say something like google.com. And if I save that and click on email, nope, not that one. If I click on the email, it will actually open up to google.com. And I'm like, okay, but I don't want to be going to Google. I want to send myself an email. So in order to do that, we use a special prefix here. And we say mail to, and then you can actually drop in your email address here. So now when you save that, come back over here, I have another problem that the text is now blue, but beyond that, if I click on it, you will see it actually opens up a new email address or a new email to my address. We will fix that styling, that blue link default by just coming down into our contact section, putting a nested A tag selector in there and overriding that color to white. And that gets our email to still show up in white. All right, we've got all of that in. Now I got to focus on my form over here. So I'll go back to my example, and I've got a form field on the left and a form field on the right. And so the first thing I think of is grid system, columns, left and right. All right, columns. But before I go and use those columns, I need another row because the row is what resets the 12 column system down to whatever width we are working inside of. So I'm going to go find my word form, and that's where I want to be replacing. So I go to my code and I've got my word form right here. So even though I'm in the col 6, I want 2 more col 6s to take up the width of the parent col 6. So to do that, I'm going to put in a row, and I'm going to say end of first row of form. Then I'm going to get my cursor in the right spot and put in 2 col 6s. And I'm going to say end of col for first name and another col 6 for end of col for last name. And then before I do any inputs, because I'm really nested in here, I want to make sure my layout is right first. So I'm going to go into this col 6 and just say first, and go into this col 6 and say last. And if I check my page, I should just see the word first and last showing up in the right spot. And if I do, I have done my nesting right. So again, we've got the first and the last. If you're feeling overwhelmed right now with the number of divs that we are deep, this is a pretty common thing to get this deep with our divs. So you just want to check, make sure you're feeling comfortable with all of this. Anyone need help at this point? Does anyone have first and last showing up anywhere other than to the left and right of each other? Or anyone need one more minute?
I need one more minute.
No problem. Couple of you there, so no problem.
Me too. And did you do the live share and I missed it?
I did, yeah, I'll repaste it.
Thank you.
Still have on my to-do list, make it easy to make it so that live share link doesn't change every night, but I gotta do some development work to make that work.
Was your email link working?
Yes.
I don't know why mine's not.
If you don't have an email client installed, like if you use gmail.com, sometimes that can be the problem. But your email should be in the href mail to : and then the actual email address.
Yeah, I did it myself and then that wasn't working. And then so I just like copied and pasted your code.
Yep.
And it's still, I mean, like even if I like right click and open a new tab, it's not bringing me anywhere. Let me see if it's because I'm not signed into mail on this.
Yeah, if the browser doesn't have a mail client to open, which is a big problem now that a lot of people just use like gmail.com instead of having mail installed. But on the Mac, it should default to opening mail, even if you don't have an account created, I think. Anyone else having a problem opening the mail link? You may get an error message
I
that
had
mail
to-
set up.
I had to right click it and open with mail.google.com. It wasn't giving me I am signed into the mail app. I don't know why. Like I can't, it won't let me like even just like click it or double click it.
That's probably a browser configuration thing. Is it working? Is the link clickable for anyone else? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it must be a browser config thing. Okay, we all good? Anyone need another minute? Anyone need debug help?
I just have a question about mail clients. Can you just speak on that a little more?
Yeah, so back in the day, everyone used an email client. And so by default on the Mac, there is one called Mail that looks like that in the dock. And almost every email service does support a protocol called IMAP and SMTP, Back in the day, it was called POP3, and then IMAP was the one that replaced it all. And a mail client was just like a web browser, except for email, right? So it would go out, it would download your email, and when you sent emails, it would send it via the SMTP protocol. And that's how everyone used email. And then Google came out with Gmail back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, I think maybe 06, somewhere around there. Of course, there were webmail clients before then, and a lot of people liked that, liked using webmail instead because it allowed them to check their email from anyone's computer and didn't require a ton of setup. IMAP and SMTP have always been a little finicky to get set up, especially when SSL came out and they started encrypting the connections and getting different ports and all of that kind of stuff. So nowadays, a lot of people don't use email clients at all. They just use webmail. There's obviously nothing wrong with that. But it does make making mail to links work a little bit harder. Some browsers have gotten better at configuring your browser so that it will open up in Gmail instead of opening up the mail client by default. But it all depends how the browser is configured. So for that very reason, that is often why you don't see mail to links on websites anymore. Like if you go to Amazon or any big company and you go to contact the company, they won't have a support at Microsoft.com. Instead, they will have a contact form, which is what we're going to be building out instead. The contact form, unfortunately, does require a back end, a server, in order to send the email, but we will be using a alternative, if not tonight, tomorrow, as a placeholder, so that we can make the contact form submissions work without having our own back end server set up. But later in the course, we will learn how to send emails from our own API. Does that answer question about email clients?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Cool. Joe, what's up?
So I figured out what was going on with mine. If anybody else is having the issue, if you right click on the link, the third option, open link with, and if you hover over that, it should, for me, it only gives mail.google.com, and then under that it says configure. And it'll bring me to Google's protocol handler settings. The only thing I have for email, there's like default behaviors, and the only one it gives me is mail.google.com, and it wasn't set to default for whatever reason. I don't know how you set mail as it, but that's how I got it to open with Gmail.
It may not let you set mail as it unless you have it configured. If you have the mail client configured, like you may have to have an account set up. What browser are you using?
I'm using Chrome.
That's weird because I don't have an open link with.
You want me to share my screen if you wanted to?
Sure.
Just a little cool little. Yeah, I don't know why it was doing that.
I'm up to date in Chrome.
Zoom overlaid over now. There we go. All right, you see everything?
Yep.
Okay. So it wasn't doing it before, but I would click it and then it would bring me up to here. So I have open link with. Maybe I don't know if Chrome's not updated, and if I hit configure, it would bring me to
interesting
this section here. I don't know.
If you go Chrome all the way up in the top left and then down to about.
Oh, you said top left?
Yeah. 1, 2, 4. Yeah, we're on the same version. Weird. I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, that's how you configure it. Okay. With all of that said, the reason why we need to work with this form is these email links don't always work reliably. So let's go ahead and build out our form. And I do have a div class col6 up here, but because we are working with input elements, it would be better to rename this as a, instead of a div class, a form call6. Oftentimes when we use inputs, we want to collect all of those inputs together in one form, and that makes interacting with the data a little bit easier to work with. So we are going to put on that form call6 when we save. That won't really change anything in the site, but it will change the behavior on our submit button once we get that submit button in there. So we've got our first and our last in. So let's go ahead and work on those. I'm going to put an input in, and I'm going to say type text. We'll see different types in a second. Input tags are self-closing tags, right? They don't need any content inside of them, so we can make them self-closing. I'm going to copy that and paste that into my last as well, and that does give me my 2 form inputs. And from there, I'm going to look at my example, and my example has first name and last name inside of them. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that up a little bit. I will say placeholder for first name and a placeholder for last name. I will save that. I will take a look. On the right track, the only thing that I don't like there is that my placeholder text is right up against the edge. So in order to fix that, I am going to add in a little bit of padding.
Excuse me, Max, can you
Yeah.
walk that back just a little bit for me?
Yeah, so the only 2 new elements that we put in here were these 2 inputs inside of our call6s.
Yes,
And
sir. It's just why did we change the div to a form?
we changed this to a form because oftentimes we want to group all of those elements together. And so when we add in our submit button, we want to make sure that the submit button captures all of the inputs that are related to this one form. So you can use an input without a form tag, but when you talk about what should this form do when it is submitted, you want to be using a form instead of a div, so all of the inputs are grouped together properly.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yep.
If I choose that same result with having a form inside of a div and then a div class row, div class call, and then my input text inside of that, was that still correct?
As long as the form is a parent of the input at some level and all of
Yeah.
the inputs are in the same form, that is okay.
Yes, that's what I got. I got a form encompassing all of that.
That's totally fine. Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't matter how many divs we put inside or outside of our forms, as long as all of the inputs are inside the form and we don't have a form inside of another form.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Trying to see if you added space in between first and last name.
I have not yet. But there is a little gap here. So the 2 things that I'm going to fix is I'm going to target inside my contact of my CSS. I'm going to target my inputs, and the 2 things I'm going to add there are padding. So I will say padding 10 pixels. And if we save, we can see that that just adds a little bit of breathing room around everything. And then the other problem I run into is if I make my page a lot bigger, we get this weird gap between them. That's because inputs, for whatever reason, default to like 250 pixels or something around there. We don't want it to be 250 pixels. And if we shrink it down, we can see we have the opposite problem, right? If they don't go down to the right size. So because we want to rely on our columns to do the sizing of those inputs, what I can do is target my input and put a width of 100% on that. That will not only shrink down the inputs when they get really tiny, but when I pull it back out, it will make sure that even at a larger size, they are spaced appropriately. So the 2 things that I targeted there, the input, I added a property of padding and I added in my width of 100%. And that is what gets my first name and my last name in the right spot. Reminder, these are self-closing tags, meaning we don't have an input closing tag. We open and close all in one tag there, and that's with the slash arrow, slash greater than. All right, let's keep going here. The next section that we have is our email address. And this is spanning the full width of the form. So because of that, I need to make sure I am outside of my row, but still inside of my form class. So I did say end of right col of contact section form. That's not where I want to be. I want to make sure that I am outside of this row. So I'm coming down right here. I'm making a new row that is still inside of my form. And we don't want to use a row without a column. So because I want to keep all of this inside a grid system, I'm going to go ahead and create my column, even though it will be the only column in this row. And then I can put my input type in. We will do an email type on this, and we will throw a placeholder in here of the word email. And if I take a look at that, I should get my email in there. Slight problem though, it is right up against my first name and my last name rows. So in order to fix that, what I will do is I will say, hey, go target any row inside my contact section and put some margin on the bottom of it of 15 pixels. And that gets me some nice spacing. Now you notice I didn't just target my row, because if I targeted my row everywhere, I would screw up the spacing on the grid system anywhere on the site, and I don't want to do that. So we're using this nested CSS here to say only apply to the rows within the contact section. And that actually did add some margin on the bottom of this row right here. But because there's nothing underneath it, it won't really cause a problem. So it's okay to target the row in general. Just make sure that you're not targeting every row everywhere on the page, because then you get some weird cascading effects going on. So nesting it inside this contact selector is going to prevent it from affecting everything. We are going to finish out our form with a text area, and then we will tackle the button. So the text area is a place to add a note. So I am going to go, all right, I need to be outside of my row. So I'll add a note in here, end of row for email. I'm going to add in another row, put another col inside of that. And then I will target my text area with the placeholder of drop me a note. And text areas are kind of weird. They are not self-closing tags. Back in the day, self-closing tags on text areas would cause some weird render issues. I don't know if that's still a case, but to this day, I believe it is recommended to not make text areas self-closing. You can actually put some content in here, and it will actually show that content in the text area as kind of preloaded text. But in general, it is recommended to not make text areas self-closing tags. We do have one problem, though. The padding and the width have disappeared. Because text areas are basically inputs with multiple rows, they are a different element, right? They aren't inputs. So if I come up to my CSS and I find where I targeted the input with the padding and the width, I'd like this padding and width to not only apply to my inputs, I also want it to apply to my text area. So I'm going to do a comma text area in my CSS. That comma is saying don't apply to inputs, don't apply to text areas in inputs. That comma is saying apply to inputs and to text areas. So it isn't narrowing down the selector, it's applying it to two separate selectors. So if I take a break there, I get my first name, my last name, my email, and I drop me a note. I'm going to add in an end of row, and we're going to pause there and start a poll. So give you guys a minute to catch up. If you are still working on it, don't vote. If you are all caught up, go ahead and vote. If you're just following along and taking notes, that's also fine. Or if you would need help, raise your hand and we can do a little bit of debugging. The form should look like this. We don't have the submit button in yet, but I'm feeling pretty good about how that's looking. You do have it working. Go back through and read through your divs. Make sure you understand why they're nested, why they're indented. Review that code, see if you have any general questions.
Max.
Yep.
I'm having a problem with I think I messed up somewhere. Like my closing div is red with prettier. It's
Okay.
not double checking for me.
Go ahead, share your screen. Let's take a look.
Yes, sir. And I'm gonna just have to drag the other thing over.
If you could, yeah.
Yes, sir. All right.
All right, let me request remote.
No closing tag on input.
Yep. So we've got our closing tag up here for last name. We just need our closing right here. And that brings prettier back in and even fix the alignment on this text area down here.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oftentimes when we see red, the problem isn't with the thing that's red itself. It's a problem with the line right above it.
Gotcha. That's fixed. Let me see. Can I get the what's inside of it to appear?
Most of you guys are voted in. We'll give you guys one more minute. If you forgot to vote, go ahead. Not another minute. It's totally fine. Got a lot built out here. So don't rush through it.
I do have one real quick.
Yeah.
I seem to have lost my placeholder text.
Okay. Go ahead and share your screen. Take a look. Well, that's interesting. How did that happen?
That my prettier also doesn't seem to be
sometimes-
working either.
Is it because it thinks there's a space in the content? Yeah, that was it. So
Okay.
having anything inside of this will
Oh.
make it think that there's content in there and will not show the placeholder. And I think that because there was just a space in there, that was enough to make the placeholder disappear.
Okay then. Thank you.
Yeah. The number of times I've misspelled placeholder and gone, where is my text? And it's just misspelled.
Stop, Louis.
Remember, this is more than just getting it to work. This is understanding it, right? So if you're looking at this and you're like, all right, I see what the final one looks like, and I see how we got it to look like that, but I couldn't do that on my own. This is your chance to ask those questions, right? There's a level of understanding here beyond just getting it to work. It's, could I do this on my own? And if you can't, that's when you got to be asking questions. The equivalent of show your work, right? Showing your work, you're showing your work, but that's not quite enough. Understanding your work so that you could do it on your own, that's the next level. All right, looks like almost everyone has voted in here. Anyone need one more minute or have questions or need debug help?
The placeholder for just my text area is not showing up.
Yeah, check to make sure that the closing tag for the text area is right next to the opening tag. There can't be any space between the opening and the closing, including a line break. Cool.
Got it.
Text holders are really picky about that, and it will just detect that white space as content and make the placeholder disappear. Okie doke. Let's go ahead and finish up this form with a nice little send button. So in order to do that, I'm going to go, all right, I've got a ton of different divs here. I got to figure out where I'm at. I still want to be outside of my row, but inside of my form. So we are going to make a new div. And this one doesn't have to be a row because it's going to be full width. We're not breaking it up into multiple columns. So I'm just going to use a regular div there. And we're going to use a button for the first time. And we can say send, and maybe we use a little emoji there. So we'll say command space to pull up our emoji picker. I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry. New div in here. The button, the word send. I'm going to do a space and do command control space to pull up my emoji picker. I'm going to do a search for mail and grab a little mailbox to put in there. I am going to say the button type will be submit. And that's going to be important in a second when we get this form actually working. We might save that for tomorrow because I want to get other sites or other parts of this built out. But we're going to do type submit, and the submit basically means, hey, when you click on this button, the entire form should submit the data. Emoji picker is control command space. If it doesn't come up, sometimes you got to like click out of the app and then put your cursor back where you want the emoji. Sometimes it's a little finicky to get it to come up. If it doesn't come up, you may have to quit VS Code and reopen it, but it's control command space to get that emoji picker up. Or if it's still not working for you, you can just copy and paste it from my code into yours. If I take a look at that, I do have technically a button. Ooh, And what happened to my first name and last name there? Oh, I put a mailbox in the wrong spot. Sorry. Okay. I do have a button, but it's quite ugly. And so now that I've got that button in there, my gut says, oh, let's go to CSS and let's make it look the way that we want it to, right? But Bootstrap is actually going to help us out there. Bootstrap has all kinds of components, basically pre-built HTML elements that make things much easier. So we've already seen this for the grid system, and we're going to get more practice with components with the nav bar that we're going to put on the project page. But for now, we're going to use our first real component, and that is buttons. So I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. And I'm going to click on docs, and then over on the left, I'm going to scroll down to the components. And inside of the components, I have buttons. So if I click to buttons, you can see that there are all kinds of buttons that they have pre-built for me. And I like this primary one, so I'm going to use that. Now, I could just copy this entire button, and that would be fine. But really, if I take this apart, I already have the button. The type we changed to submit, but that's not going to change any of the styling. All that they're showing me here is that I need to add in two separate classes to my button, the BTN and the BTN primary. So I'm going to go ahead and copy those, come back to my HTML, go to my button, and paste in the two classes, the BTN and the BTN primary. And if I save that and take a look at my site, I now have my send button. The last thing I need to do is target that BTN and make it a width of 100%, and I am officially done with my contact form.
Can you go over that one more time, please?
Yep. The only thing that we really added in our code was this class BTN and BTN primary. But the more important thing is getting comfortable with the Bootstrap documentation and seeing where that comes from, right? And so I went to getbootstrap.com. I clicked on docs in the top left. And then over on the left here, I scrolled down about halfway to the component section and clicked on buttons. From there, they show you that there's this like base class that doesn't really do much. It probably adds a little bit of padding onto it. But if I scroll down to the variants, they've got all of these different colors for all of the different buttons. And what they're showing us here is like, if we like this red danger one, we could take this class BTN and BTN danger and put it onto our own button, and it would make it look like this danger button up here. And you can see that that's not only just the padding or the color, it's also changing the color of the text, and it's changing the cursor, and it's giving us a nice little hover effect. So when we hover over it, that background changes a little bit and makes it feel like we're actually going to click on that button, right? So we take that class, and all we need to do is add that class to our existing button right here. That will style everything out. The only thing that it doesn't do is make our button full width. So what I did in my CSS, in the contact section, all of the CSS that I'm working on is nested within my contact here. I target that BTN, I set the width to 100%, and I am all caught up and good to go. So feel free to use Bootstrap components. It is worthwhile to go through this list and see what all of these different items are. We will continue to use Bootstrap components both on this site and on future projects. But oftentimes we will go to create something from scratch and realize that Bootstrap has not only done it for us, but they've probably designed it a little better than our novice designs may be in the CSS. Those little things like hover effects on buttons can really add to the user experience, right? So at some point, it's worth going through the list of these, 25-ish components, playing around with them, kind of just seeing what your options are, because 9 times out of 10, that component will be a better starting point for you than building it up on your own. And like I said, we're going to get more experience with those bootstrap components, so don't panic. But if you've got some free time, going through this and seeing what is pre-built can be helpful. All right, anyone have questions? All right. Let's get this finished out. We do have our portfolio section down here and our footer. And you may think we're done, but we've got an entire project page we also have to build out. So we're going to be spending time. We're not going to get this all done tonight. We will also circle back and get this form to work, because if you're on this page and click the send button, it just brings you up to the top. And so what we will do is make it so that send button actually generates out an email and sends it. But let's get our content finished up first.
Would that be kind of considered using JavaScript?
We won't use JavaScript for it. We're going to use in built-in browser defaults using the action tag on a form. However, when we do learn JavaScript and learn the back end, we'll revisit the portfolio website and show you how you could use JavaScript to send that form.
Gotcha. Yes,
So
sir.
yes, you could. We won't tonight just because we haven't gotten into JavaScript, but you definitely could. Okay. Let's go ahead into this portfolio section. So the good news is we are done with the contact. We're going to go all the way down to the closing section tag, and we are going to make our final section. And we will obviously call this portfolio. And I've got a another H1 for my portfolio. And then because this text is not in a column, because I don't need to get it side by side, because I don't need to do any of that, I don't really need to put that in a div or a row and a col. I can just put it right in a p tag, and I'll say, to view more details about the projects, click on any of the cards. I save that, I come over here, I scroll down, and obviously this is not the way that I want it to look. So I will go into my CSS, and for the final time on this page, target my portfolio. I will throw in the padding, and I will also throw in the color. Save that, scroll down. Notice I did not change the color to white here because the contrast of that text would not be great. So for lighter color backgrounds, we want to use darker text. For darker color, or for, you know what I'm trying to say. Just make sure that the contrast of the text is easy enough to read there. As a second on that. Next up, we got to get our projects showing up. But because they are left to right, the first thing I think of is columns. So before I dive into any of the content, I want to make sure that my layout is working. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm still in my section ID portfolio. If I come outside of that, my background's not going to look right, and I'm going to have all different kinds of problems. So I'm going to go beneath my P tag, and I'm going to make my row. Again, can't use rows or can't use columns without rows. And then I'm going to add in my 3 cols. So I'll just say project number 1. And if you are someone who is easy to lose copy and paste, it's totally fine to create these manually or to copy and paste them. So I'm just going to do my project number 1, my project number 2, and my project number 3. Go ahead and save that. Come over, take a look. I've got project 1, 2, 3 showing across the screen, and that means my layout is looking good. Question.
So like, why didn't you have to divide the columns to 12 for like the projects?
Yeah, good question. So if we don't specify a size, it will either evenly divide it amongst the space that is left, or it will take up the remaining space. So if we make this a col 6, these two will default to basically a 3 and a 3. So we can either say don't put any size on it and it will evenly split it up, or if we put sizes on everything else, it will automatically split the remaining size among them. Good question. Any other questions? Anyone need another minute?
Yeah, my portfolio section is not in line with the rest of my other contact, and
Div soup. Go ahead and share your screen.
I've been replacing my divs and adding them in. Oh, did I share it?
Nope.
Here it
There you
is.
go.
So this is what it looks like, but that's not what I want.
Okay. So it says that this div is the end of the site container, but if I click on it and scroll all the way up to the top, it's not highlighting that. So we've got to have a problem. So let's go through section, 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 and it's not highlighting here. So that must mean that we've got a problem in between. So let's see if we do our H1 opening and closing, our div class row, but that is highlighting all the way down there. And we're like, ooh, that's probably not at the right spot. So we've got col opening, closing, form opening, form closing. All right, so
My divs are cooked.
I think we've got an extra div here. Placeholder email. No, that was right for that row. All right, so this div is closing out that row. Let's just try and put one more div in here, and that closes out the section. All right. Can't always be an easy case, can it? All right, row opening, closing. That's good. Row for the email. Opening, closing, that's good. Row, col, that's fine. Submit button, div, opening, closing, that's fine. This div should be closing out the left, right column. This div is this should be closing out the section.
Mm.
And then this form is done here.
Yay. Thank you.
So that was just a case of the two getting flipped, but you want to basically say what is supposed to be in my form. The 3 rows are supposed to be in my form, and then it closes out the div for the giant row of the left and right content, and then it closes out the section, which is the entire contact.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Other questions? Everyone good?
I was just wondering what the extension was again to highlight the different divs and sections.
Yeah, in different colors. It's called rainbow tags.
Okay.
I put it in chat. No,
My
it's called
my,
rainbow
my
tape.
portfolio ain't showing up, but I'm gonna try to debug it.
Okay.
Um,
While everyone is catching up, let's go ahead and
Yo, which
do.
theme is that you're saying looks better? I can't see it in the chat. Or was you talking about hers?
Oh, yeah, I was talking about the others.
Gotcha.
Looks better than the red.
Yeah, the red got old. At first I had a green, and now I'm trying something new.
Let's go ahead and do attendance before I forget about it. The secret word tonight is going to be card. C-A-R-D. See why in a second. Card is the next bootstrap component that we will be playing with. Once you are done attendance, last check to make sure that your portfolio section is looking like this. You should have project 1, 2, 3 across the screen. Again, that is just to make sure that we don't get lost in our divs. Secret word is card for attendance. Speaking of cards, I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, this seems like a pretty easy layout thing, but I've got my image and I've got the image, you know, kind of goes to the full width, which is nice. And then I've got some padding going on between the image and the font sizes are a little different here. And then I've got a nice button going on down at the bottom, right? And we totally could accomplish that in our own CSS, but we can totally accomplish any component that Bootstrap has created in our own CSS. Maybe with a little help of JavaScript, but for the most part, we could do that. But this is an opportunity to go, oh, this is a pre-built component that we don't need to style ourselves. So if we take a look at card in the Bootstrap documentation, which is only 2 down from the button, we can see this nice example going on. And this is, again, something that we could build on our own, but because Bootstrap has already built it for us, we are able to rely on that and get it working ourselves. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to copy their little example. So I'm going to use the clipboard icon in the top right. You are welcome to highlight and copy and paste. I will drop the link to this in the chat as well. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to come into my project 1 column, hit enter, and say end of project number 1 call. And then I'm going to paste in my card. And once I do that, I'm going to head back to my site and I get a broken image, but for the most part, my card is actually looking pretty good. Again, I got this from Bootstrap, card over on the left, and then it's the first section of the example. From there, I'm actually going to send you a image or the images that you can use in the Zoom chat. I do encourage you to go back and update these with your own screenshots, but for class, we can use these. So from the Zoom chat, go ahead and download those 3 images. I cannot show you that on screen share, but if you hover over the image itself, you get a little download icon in the top right of it. Go ahead and download that, and we are going to download them into a folder in our VS Code called IMG. So go ahead and make the folder called IMG, head over to Zoom and either download them into the folder, or you can download them to your downloads folder and then drag them into the image folder. One thing to keep in mind with VS Code, it's very easy to accidentally put an image that is not inside the image folder. So if you collapse this image folder and you notice that you've got a file outside of it, it is not in the right directory. So make sure that you get all 3 images inside your IMG folder. So once I get those 3 files downloaded, I'm going to create the image folder. I'm going to make sure the files are inside that image folder, and then I can modify my card HTML here. So the IMG SRC, I can't just say weather app here because weather app is inside the image folder. So I need to say IMG/weather app.png. Whenever we use an image for accessibility reasons, we don't want to just set the source tag. We also want to set the alt tag. So we could say something like screenshot of weather app. Save that, and if I come over, I should see my weather screenshot showing up. I'm going to finish this off and head to break. The rest of this is just cleaning up the placeholder. So don't panic that I'm going fast in here. This is just cleaning up the placeholder text. So the card title, I'm going to replace with weather app. The P tag, I'm going to say first front end project modeled after a weather website. And then the href, we're going to just say make it rain. We're going to make that link actually go to another page after the break. So everything that we've done other than downloading the images and getting it in the folder is largely a copy and paste here. So I don't want you to panic and look at all of this HTML and be like, whoa, that went way too quickly. Most of this HTML came in from Bootstrap. So once we got it in Bootstrap, we want to make sure it's not impacting our project 2 and our project 3. If that project 2 or 3 has moved, hold up, take the card back out of it, figure out why did that move? Did I put in a missing closing tag? Did I put it in the wrong spot? Where am I at? If you get the card in and project 2 and 3 are at the right spot, we can come over here and start working our way from the top down. The first thing that we do is we replace this source tag here and we say IMG/weather app. Then we check, does our image show up? If our image shows up, then we're good. If it doesn't, make sure you've got your files loaded into the IMG folder over here. Then continue working your way down. Go down to the card title, replace the card title, go down to the card text, replace the card text, go down to the button text, replace that, and then you are all caught up and good to go. Bootstrap can be overwhelming because we're putting so many divs in at once, but when you work your way top down, always check to make sure that when you paste something in, it doesn't impact anything else on the site. As long as it doesn't, then you can work your way top down to get that component stylized and customized to what you would like. If you got this one card working, go ahead and go on break. Be back at 7:25. We'll stick around for the next 2 minutes or so in case anyone needs help. Otherwise, we'll see you after break.
Cool. All right. All right, Max. I am struggling here.
All right. Go ahead and share screen.
Yeah, I'm a little bit behind. Just trying to pay attention. Ooh. I was watching what you were doing, but I wasn't doing it at the time. I was trying
All
to pay
right.
attention.
So first things first, we want to make sure that our layout is right, because if our layout isn't right, everything else is going to break and get weird. Can you drag your browser over for me?
Yes, sir. So right there, we're gonna add a cow, right? A column.
First, I want to make sure everything's good layout wise. So we got our projects across, everything's good there. We're good to go. We already have our column set up for our 3 projects. So now we want to place the card inside the column. So in order to do that, we're going to go to Bootstrap. We are going to go to this section. You already had it highlighted. Copy that. And then we are going to paste that inside this column.
Gotcha. Okay.
From there, we need to replace this SRC with the actual images. But you got to download them from the Zoom chat first and put them into a folder called IMG in your VS Code. Once you get that done, it's just working your way down, updating the source, the alt tag, the title, the card text, and the button text.
Yes, sir.
So I will let you work on that.
I appreciate you, Max. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, Max, I still don't have my portfolio up. I even try to look at it. I can't find the problem.
Okay. Share your screen.
Alrighty.
And then we'll take a break there so everyone has a chance to take a break, and then we'll circle back after break and get everyone caught up if you're still struggling. Okay. Request remote. You said your portfolio isn't showing up, so portfolio H1. No problems here that I can see, and Prettier isn't mad. Can you drag your browser window over so I can see what's going on?
Yep.
Okay, so your portfolio is showing up. It's just showing up in black. And so the problem there is in your CSS, you are targeting portfolio with a lowercase p, but in your HTML, you've got a uppercase P. And just like that, you got that showing up.
Okay.
So
Appreciate
your next steps are the same as Zod's, which are going to the Bootstrap documentation, getting that card section, and pasting that into your first column in that section.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
I'm gonna just disable these rainbow tags. Thought I liked it. That it's not me.
All right. I encourage you to take a break. Go get food. Coding for an hour and a half without any breaks is not a good idea. So even if you're behind, that's okay. You can catch up after your break. So I will circle back with everyone and help you debug at 7:25 if you don't have it working. But don't power through. It's important to take breaks. See you at 7:25. All right, so let's take a moment here. Did anyone not get caught up? Does anyone need help? Does anyone have weird layout issues? Your card may actually be a little too big or too small right now. We'll fix that in a second. But this is always a moment where we may lose 1 or 2 people. And this is the trade-off of using a pre-designed component, right? Is we're bringing in a lot of someone else's code. And once we hit that threshold of like, all right, we're finally feeling comfortable with our own code, it can get really easy to put someone else's code in and then everything breaks. So, Zakeem, did you have a question?
Yeah, I definitely have some issues. My style my style sheet disconnected somehow. I'm not sure why. So
Okay.
like my page is still responsive, but all my color just disappeared.
All right, share your screen. Let's take a look.
All right. Mm.
All right. Okay, so you somehow ended up in a workspace, and I am worried that your style.css has been deleted.
Really? It was just good moments before the break.
Oh, you know what? Here it is down here. All right, so I'm gonna just copy this and I'm gonna throw it in a sticky note just so we have it somewhere. Come on, why aren't you? Command N. I do. Okay, do it this way. And then I'm also gonna grab your HTML just in case. Okay, then whenever you end up with groups going on here, it can get really weird. So I'm gonna close this whole thing. I'm gonna do a new window. I'm gonna reopen your portfolio. Yeah, and your style.css has just disappeared. So I'm gonna recreate it and paste it in. And then save, reopen your index, and go live. And can you drag that window over? Okay. So it looks like we're back in business. Your colors are back in, so you should be good to go. Just your portfolio is missing the styles for that. So if I take a look, you got a dash here that's preventing that ID from getting applied.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I was
and
struggling on the card section and then it went AWOL.
yeah, so it's just the portfolio section here. Needs a background color. And then I'll let you continue working on that.
All right.
But you should be back in business. I don't know what happened there. Your style.css got maybe moved out of the folder or accidentally deleted or something. You know what probably happened? You were probably dragging the images in, and the
Yeah.
images made it get a little funky. So you should be back in business now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else need help?
Prettier is upset on my end.
Okay, go to your screen and take a look.
This one.
Okay, I'm gonna request remote.
Mhm.
And okay. Um so let's see. Sometimes I like to cheat and start at the bottom.
Mhm.
And that closing div is lining up with the opening div, so that's not a problem. So let's do high level. Section is fine. Section is fine. Section is good. That section is also good. Okay. So when we open Prettier, it gives us this really weird like error message. But if you scroll up enough, it can give you a hint. It says unexpected closing section 112. So that means in here, it saw the section and it's lining up with this section up here, but there is something that opened that didn't close. So this call is closed out at the right spot. Our 3 calls are here. What we are missing is the closing div for this row. And so if we close that out here, Prettier is now happy and you're back in business.
Okay, yeah, I was looking and I was like, I don't know what's wrong with it.
Yeah, sometimes using the prettier error is helpful. It isn't going to tell us exactly what's wrong, but it's going to tell us approximately where, and then that can be helpful to narrow it down.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else need help?
Can you show us what it's supposed to look like?
I sure can. It's supposed to look like that. And your card may be sized a little weirdly. If you go, it's not like growing into the column size. And if you shrink it enough, you may be able to get it to do some weird overlapping things. But it should look like that.
My font looks like it's larger than your font in the card. I'm not sure if it's just like me seeing it or.
Interesting. Hit Command 0 in your browser and make sure your zoom is set to 100%. Is it still larger?
Yeah, it's set to 100%. And then
Okay. The other thing that we did, we adjusted this P tag font size in our CSS around line 40 on mine. But I made sure that that was done inside the about section.
Okay, mine is not inside the about section.
So that will do it.
Nice. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okie doke. So we need to fix one more thing here. And this may be easier to see if I apply some CSS. So I'm going to target all the calls on my site and add a border of 1px solid red. And if I take a look at that, I can actually
Not sharing your screen, Max.
Yeah, I am.
Oh, it's not working for me.
Can anyone else see my screen? Okay. If you still can't see it at Zoom, you may need to drop and re-enter the room.
All right. Yeah, sir.
So if I expand this out, we can actually see how big my columns are here, right? And so we have a couple different options. We could center this card so all three of them took up the same amount of space, but I kind of want my screenshot to be as big as possible for the screen size, right? And this is going to be the first time that we work with responsive web design here. So I want to make this card take up the full width of the screen. So if I shrink this down and I take a closer look at the code, you can actually see that Bootstrap put this style width 18 REM in. REM is a way of doing like relative sizing. But if I take that style tag out of my card and take a look and expand it back out, now my card is based off of the width of the column. So when you are copying and pasting chunks of code, you really want to read through the top down to the bottom and go, hey, do I really understand what each one of these things is doing? Things like card body and card title, sure, I didn't write that CSS, but I can take a guess at what that CSS is doing. But up here, that style 18 REM could really impact our final design. So I take that out. Now everything is sized properly. Now, before you panic, we're going to copy and paste this twice. Before you do, very important to say, what are we copying? Where are we pasting it? We are not copying the call. We are only copying the card. So I'm going to put my cursor on that div, and I see that my closing div is here. So I want to be really careful not to get this closing div down here. I only want to get the div of the card. So I'm going to highlight that entire card and copy it. Then I'm going to go down to my project number 2, make sure that I am inside this div, delete out my project 2, and paste my entire card. If you save and your prettier is mad at you, Command Z. You did something wrong. Prettier is not mad at you. We can do this one more time. I'm going to go down to my project 3, delete out project 3, make sure I'm inside my call, go ahead and paste that card one more time.
Max,
Yes,
you spelled website wrong.
of course I did. Couldn't have told me that before I copied and pasted it 3 times.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, you're good. Thank you. When I save, I should have that card 3 times. It should still be in a column. If things have gone horribly wrong here, Command Z and get back to the where it was. Check your copy and paste. Copying and pasting code is not like copying and pasting text. It's very easy to do this wrong. We are only copying the opening div and all of the content inside the div class card. We are pasting it in our 2 other columns. Once we have that done, I'm going to confirm, I'm going to expand this all the way out. Everything looks pretty good here. So I'm going to go back to my CSS, take out this border 1px solid red. That was just a debug thing for me, right? That's just to make sure that our sizing is right in our columns. I can go ahead and take that out, and then I can go through and start updating the information. Do not try and follow me. Use your own intuition here and go through and update the code, right? So you're going to update, make sure you're not updating the first one because we want the weather app to show up one time. The next one is going to be called feedback form. And then I'm just going to go through and update the content. When we are done, it should look like this. Give everyone a minute to style that out.
I didn't nest my row properly, so mine's just trying to blow. Freaky, finicky. How do I fix this?
Let me know if you need help. You're off mute, by the way.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm gonna try to figure it out.
Okay. Everyone a minute to get that text updated. If you have broken your layout, feel free to ask for help. If you have an image that is not working, feel free to ask for help. But don't panic and go, oh, I got to update everything he updated. Go through and just read through the code, right? Because oftentimes you get panicked on following the steps and you go, wait, I can do this on my own.
Yeah, I'm gonna need some help here.
Yep. Go cheers. Oh, share screen. Okay, so you were trying to follow along with my code, not following along with the steps. So when we get to this step, we don't want to just be following my code. We want to follow the steps that I did. So I'm going to take this out for now. And we've got our calls in here, but Prettier is mad at us. So before we add in any new code, we got to get Prettier back and happy with us. So p tag div lining up for that. This looks like an extra div that we don't need. So I'm going to take that out. Prettier is still mad. So let's see where it says it's mad. If I click on that and scroll up, it will tell us that it doesn't like this closing button because there's already a closing button up there. So I'm going to take this one out.
Yeah,
Okay,
because I was having trouble inserting the image to begin with before break. That was my problem really to begin with.
Closing div there. Okay, Prettier's back and happier with us. So the problem wasn't with the image. The problem was started all the way up here with the button, right? So we want to keep track of Prettier. When Prettier goes red, that's a sign of, all right, I got to figure out what's going on with those closing tabs. Now, when we come down here, the right solution is this is a whole heck of a lot of code, right? I didn't just start writing this. I didn't just go, oh, let's call this a body and a title and the card text. This is all a component in Bootstrap. So if you drag over a browser window for me to this monitor, I'll show you where I got that. Yeah, okay, so you are on the right track. I'm not taking just a little bit of this. Whenever we take a component, we want to take the whole component with it, because otherwise it's really easy to get lost of like, does the card title go in the body or is that just another element all in the card? We want to take this entire thing. So I'm going to copy this, bring it over to here and go, all right, that needs to go inside my column. So I'm going to go inside my column and paste it. And then I can go through and update little pieces of it. Like the style, we don't want it to be a certain width. We want it to be based off of the column width. And then for the images, we need to use the images that are in your folder. So I'm going to say img to tell it what folder it's in, and then say weather.png. And if we save that and take a look over here, we can see our images are looking better. We're missing a little bit of padding on this section. And just like that, we've got our first card done. So from there, it's just a matter of updating the text and then making sure we're copying and pasting right. So we're going to copy just the card because we already have our columns done down here. So I'm going to click on this div and make sure I know where that closing div is, highlight that, and copy and paste that 2 times.
Okay.
And that is what's going to get our 3 cards to show up. So now it's just a matter of going through and replacing this like placeholder text with what you actually want to be in there, and then also updating the image source and the alt tag.
I see.
Max, I didn't nest my row properly on this on the last div column for portfolio. I've been trying to find, I found I just don't know how to add the end div tag. I keep trying to add it, but it keeps getting a hit on Prettier.
All right, share screen, let's take a look.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we don't need a row here because we've already are already in a row and a column.
Gotcha.
So this one we don't need at all. And then if I save, Prettier is not mad at you. So now it's just a matter of saying, okay, I want this card to show up 2 more times. So we're thinking about this hierarchically. The container, the very top, is everything. This section is this color band in the site. Then we get the row, which is saying, all right, we're going across the screen. Then we're saying a col, which is saying how wide across the screen should we go. And then we get the card itself, which is going to have all the content in it. So we're going to take this card and go, all right, it starts here and it ends here. I'm going to take that, and what am I trying to copy and paste? I'm trying to copy the card and put it into the two other columns. So that's going to be here and here. And then we're going to let Prettier do its magic and do our indentation. Take a look in your browser. Is that doing what you need it to?
Yeah, sir. Thank you. At first,
Yep.
it was going all underneath each other. I appreciate it.
No problem. Anyone else need help? Going once, going twice. Okay. So I've got my portfolio section in here. Let's go through and maybe do a little bit of tweaking in here. So the last thing, having page content go right down to the bottom of the screen isn't always the best thing. Sometimes you feel like you want a little bit more breathing room down there. So good idea to end out the site with a little footer section. This is the first time that we're not actually calling it another section. Footer is just a semantic, another semantic tag. I'm going to put in a copyright symbol, which again is Control-Command-Space, and then I'll do a search for copyright, and that will bring up my little C. I'm actually going to use the second one here. The first one is I believe is an actual emoji, and emojis don't get affected by font color. So I'm going to pick this second copyright one, just because that's like the actual character, the Unicode character, as opposed to an emoji. I will say 2024, cup state. Save that, come over here, and of course it shows up, but it's got no styling on it. So that is the last thing that I need to put the generic styling on. I will target my footer. And in my footer, I will say, hey, let's apply padding to it like we have every other section. Let's make the background on that black. And let's make the text color white. So go ahead and save that. Now I get my nice little footer anchoring everything at the bottom. And we got that nice padding to make it feel like I can scroll further down on that page. So the only thing we added was this tiny little footer in the HTML and then some CSS in here. Okay, now that we've got that in, we've got to do a cleanup pass. So we still have to make these links work, but there are a couple things that I'd like to clean up about this interface. So I start at the top and always work my way down. The first thing that I notice is I've got this arrow here, and that's nice to tell the user, hey, there's more content below this section, but I would like to make it so if I click on that, it scrolls me to the right place. In order to achieve that, first, I got to go find that arrow in my code. So I'm going to scroll up until I find my arrow, which is going to be a span tag with a keyboard arrow down. You may have used a different symbol. That's totally fine. We're looking for the ID arrow down. And I'm going to put all of that in an A tag. And once I get that in there, I want to make sure my closing A tag is in the right spot because it needs to know what is the link here. That A tag is going to, again, encompass the entire span. And I'm going to put an href on that. And just like we saw the mail to for the first time this class, where I can do a mail to and put an email address in, we can tell the browser to scroll down to another section on the page. In order to do that, we use the pound sign. That pound sign needs to line up with an ID. So just like we have seen pound signs on our IDs in our CSS, we also can use that for our links. So I'm going to say about. Now, this will not work unless the section or something on the page has an ID of about. The casing on this also matters, and the spacing. So no spaces on either side of these quotes. Again, the pound sign, and then make sure that the spelling and the casing of this lines up with the ID down here. If everything does, when we save and come back over here, you notice the button arrow color has changed a little bit. We wanted to override that, we could with our CSS, but when we click on that, it should scroll us down to the About section and to the rest of our page. So that's a little functionality. Again, all added by that A tag there. Put in the span tag that we already have, and make sure you've got your closing A tag there as well. I don't like how Prettier wrapped that. Let me see if I can fix that. Prettier might say, too bad. There we go. It's a little bit better. Do this. There we go. That's better. I like that. So we've got our A href. We added an ID. We got our span, our closing A tag. Check the functionality. Make sure that's working. The next thing I'm noticing is the colors on this are pretty nice, but the sections kind of run together. And this isn't a padding problem, right? We've got enough space everywhere, so I'm not mad about that, but I'd like there to be a little bit more separation. So we could do a border, and this is all total preference. So I'll show you what a border looks like yet. So we'll do a section, we'll do a border on it, and let's say 2px solid black. And if I save that, border bottom.
You misspelled solid.
I misspelled solid. Thank you. Okay, so that's okay. We could play with that a little bit and go, all right, maybe let's make it 5 pixels. And I'm like, okay, that's not bad, but it's not quite what I'm going for. Well, this is another little trick. Just like we can do a text shadow when we've got a background to make the text easier to read, we can also do something called a box shadow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my box dash shadow, and I want this to be positioned up from where the section starts. So I'm going to say negative 10 pixels. Basically, where the section is, start positioning it above where the section starts. Then I want it to be 0 pixels offset. I want it to be straight up. I want it to be 25 pixels wide. And then I'm also going to add in a color. And if I save that, you'll notice this isn't quite black. It's an off shade of black. But if you notice, that really makes these sections pop, right? It gives it this nice feathered look there and makes it look like all of these sections are almost cards on top of each other. So just a little design trick there to make things pop.
Quick question though.
Yeah.
Is there a way to make it so it doesn't affect the top section with like just the name, like the title card? It could be just your background's dark enough you don't see it, but
yeah, that's probably what it is. Yeah, so you have a couple options. Instead of making it apply to every section, you could say about contact and just separate them out with commas.
okay.
That's probably going to be the easiest approach. Portfolio and my footer. And that will make it not apply to the first one. There is a way, there's a pseudo selector called nth child, where you can basically say, don't make it apply to the first one, but make it apply to all the rest of them. So you can get fancy with CSS selectors, but sometimes simpler is better, and just having it apply to what you want, especially when you already have IDs on all of those, is the better way to go.
Mhm.
All right. Now I'm going through this and I'm like, all right, when we think we are done with a website, we don't want to forget about mobile responsiveness. So if I'm designing on my screen and I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know what, this is a pretty decent website, right? It's not anything super fancy on the design, but the colors go together, the contrast is good. I'm feeling really good about this site. And then I shrink it all the way down. And when I shrink it all the way down and scroll down here, we can see that things start to get cut off. So oftentimes we want to emulate what this will look like on an actual phone. Well, this is kind of cool because the Chrome dev tools have this built in. If you don't have Chrome downloaded on your Mac yet, I would recommend that you do so after class, because we are going to be using those debug tools more and more with JavaScript. Why can I not resize? There we go. But for now, you can just kind of follow along. I'm going to right click and inspect. And once I get into these inspect tools, which we've seen us play around with a little bit, and other browsers have these features as well. I don't want to say that you absolutely have to use Chrome, but for the sake of following along with class, it might be a little easier. We've seen this top button up here. If we click on that button and hover over any particular section, we're able to get more details about that particular div. But what we want to work on is this second button. This is a device toolbar. So if we click on that, it will actually show us what our page is going to look like on a different device. And so I can scroll up to the top and go, ooh, that is not pretty. Now, my name might be a little bit longer than yours. You may not have this problem, but as we come down, we may see some additional issues like our name getting cut off here. Before we go through and fix all of those, though, up at the top, we've got this nice drop down here. We can actually change what device we're testing on. So we can say iPad Pro, and then we can even use this button up here in the top right to rotate it as well. Sometimes you may need to refresh this page, but you can see, hey, this is actually pretty nice. I can see this is exactly how it would look like on an iPad Pro. I'm going to change this back to an iPhone 12 Pro. It doesn't really matter which one you're on, but what we want to start doing is pick a popular phone and go, all right, I need to make this mobile responsive. Because if I'm at OpenHack, which will be coming up, I think next week, I will get more details on that. But if we're at OpenHack and we're like, hey, check out this cool portfolio site that I just made, and you give someone a link, they're going to pull it up on the phone and go, ooh, this isn't pretty. Well, we can't always have people pull up our websites on the exact size screen that we're working on. So we're going to need to go through and actually clean some of this up. The first thing that I notice is my name is just too big for a mobile display. And I don't really want to hyphenate my name. I don't want to get it. I just want to shrink that up. But I only want to shrink it on smaller screen sizes. So what I'm going to do is the order in your CSS doesn't matter too much. But in this case, I kind of want to group the elements together, because if I ever come back and want to edit my website, I want to see the CSS selectors all kind of grouped together. So I'm going to go find where I have my name, and that's this intro H1. I'll find it in my HTML just to confirm it. That is my H1 up here. And now I want to say, all right, I want that font size smaller, but only on certain size screens. We saw this in the Netflix project. We can do an @media query. And the media query is going to say only on screens that have a max width of 600 pixels. Where 600 pixels coming from? If we come back over to the browser, we can actually see an iPhone 12 screen is 390 pixels wide and 844 pixels tall. So 600 is going to be under this 390 threshold. I'm good there. And then I can retarget my intro H1 and say, hey, I would like that font size to be 48 pixels instead. Now I can come back over. Not only did that shrink up my name for me, which is what I wanted, but if I click on this button and come outside of the emulator again, I can see my name is still big. So when we're working on responsive design, it's important not only to test on the smaller screen size, but also to make sure that we didn't break on the bigger screen size. There is something called mobile first design, where developers have sometimes found that it is easier to make the entire website in mobile first and then to go in and make it look good on desktop, as opposed to what we are doing, which is it all looks fine on desktop. Now let's make it look good on mobile. So that is called mobile first design. Pros and cons to it. But a term that I want to throw out there because that is something that can be asked in an interview. Okay, so I got my name in there. Let's see what's going on. I don't know why my code section is not centered. So let's find what's going on with that. I'm going to pop open this section. I'm going to go down to the code. And it looks like we were relying on the Flexbox to justify the content center. But I also want that text to be center. So I am going to say that's something that can apply on both screen sizes. So I'm going to target all code elements and say text align center. And that fixes my text alignment. And I may also target that code, but only on the smaller screen sizes. And say font size on that, let's bump it down to 16 pixels. See what it is right now. Font size. Okay, 30. It's getting overridden by my selector there. So I gotta be more specific. Excuse me. Okay. Here is a situation where order does matter. I've got my intro code at my media selector. However, down here, I've got my intro code, and because this is lower in the file, this font size 30 pixels is overriding it. So I need to move this up in my file to be above my media query. And while I'm here, I'm going to move my text align center into my intro code. Take out this selector. So now when I save that, it does shrink it down. So order does matter sometimes in our CSS. The problem that I had was this intro code font size 16 pixels was above the font size on the larger screen sizes. So the larger screen size defaulted to working. So I took this intro code, it was down beneath my intro H3, moved it above my media selector, and then added this into my media selector to make it responsive here. I'm going to pause there for a second. This intro code, again, I cut and paste and moved up from a different section, a little lower in the file. And then this intro code, I just shrunk that font size up a little bit. Okay. First way we... Oh, question? Okay. First place we saw responsiveness is our app media queries. Okay, that's helpful, right? And we can actually solve layout issues with our app media queries, but there is a more efficient way, especially when we're using the grid system. So if I scroll down here, my about section is fine. Nothing I need to do in there. But when I get down to this contact form, it's a little too tight for me, right? If I were on my phone, I would kind of be annoyed that everything is laid out right next to each other. I want to basically tell it, take that form and wrap it down to the next line, but only on smaller screen sizes. We can accomplish that with our HTML. So if I go down, I put in 2 column 6s here, but I'm going to get more specific. I'm going to say on a medium sized screen, I would like it to be a col 6. But on a smaller size screen, an extra small, make it 12. And I need to do that for both columns. Now, the order here does matter. Bootstrap and HTML in general applies classes first to last. So you want to start with your bigger sizes first and then work your way down to smaller ones. So if for some reason you wanted to say, I want it to be 6 on a medium, 8 on a small, and 12 on an extra small, you do have to go largest to smallest in the order of these classes. Do make sure that you have a space between here, but when we save, we have said, okay, on medium or larger, make it 6 columns across. On extra small, make it 12 columns across. 12 columns is going to take up the whole row. That will force it to stack on top of each other. So now our contact form is not only the right size, but again, whenever we're working with responsiveness, it is very possible that we just broke this on larger screen sizes. So we always want to come out of our emulator, make sure that our form is still left and right of each other. If it's not, we did something wrong with this class here, or we didn't get a space, or we screwed up the quote. If it is working, that's all great. Go back to the device emulator, make sure it's stacked on top of each other, and we should be in good shape. Grid system is often the easiest way to make our site responsive, because what we can do is just make up that content take up a little bit more space. Final thing we're going to do down here is don't love the way that this is showing up on mobile. So we're going to attack that. We're going to come down here. You got to make sure we're in the right spot. We're going to come down to our calls. And here I'm going to say, hey, on a small size screen, I want it to be 4. But on an extra small screen, I want it to be 6. So I'm going to copy that and make sure that is applying to all 3 columns. Again, the columns, not the cards. And if I save that, now I have them stacked on top of each other, unless I come out of mobile and then I still have them side by side. So that is all 3 calls. Right above my card parents, I modified that to be a call SM4 and an XS6 instead of just a regular call. If you have that working, of course, you can always just shrink down your screen size here, but that device emulator, right-click, inspect, click on the little device icon here, and then up at the top, you can pick different devices and see what it will look like on different size screens.
Can you show that one more time, please?
Yep. Inside Chrome, right click anywhere and go, or right click inside the page, go down to inspect. In the top left, there's 2 icons up here to the word, to the left of the right, to the left of the word elements. I can talk, I'm not tired, I don't know what you're talking about. Over here, it will say toggle device toolbar. It's also Command Shift M on your keyboard shortcut. When you click on that, it will shrink down the screen, and then up at the top, you can change this to different devices and get an idea of what the different screen sizes are. I love that even Google puts iPhone before their own devices.
And then
You put this string of text on the second card because you wanted to start the stack there.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I said on small screens I want it to be 4, so 3 cards across. But then
Yeah.
on extra small screens, I want it to show 2 across and 1 at the bottom, basically.
Yeah. I was asking like what's the reason why you didn't put it in with the first card above the first card?
I put them on all 3 columns.
Oh. Mine's still working, I just did one. But I'm gonna put it on all 3.
It could be that this yeah, because this is a 6, it should be putting them left and right. I'm actually not sure why it's not doing that. I may have actually told you the wrong order. Let me see. Maybe it goes smallest to largest instead of largest to smallest. Nope.
Yeah, I was
I don't know why that's not working. I would have to play with it, but we are getting some responsiveness. Better than it was. I will play with that and let you guys know tomorrow why we're not getting them side by side. Anywho,
My down arrow shifted out of place. I'm not sure why.
interesting. Go ahead, share your screen, take a look. Me request remote. And I'm going to find that in my code. That is the weird calc thing that you have to do with the arrow down. So I'm going to take a look at your style and find your arrow down. Yeah,
No
this
space.
is. I hate calc so much. It needs a
yeah.
space between them. It is so dumb that it needs it, but that does fix the positioning.
Okay, thank you.
Don't get me started on how annoying that. Like certain syntax I get of why case
Like,
matters.
what am I doing?
But why do you really need a space between the minus to like that just bothers me. No other CSS is like that. If you put 2 spaces or no space between something, CSS is fine with it. But calc, it's like, no, I'm going to be very particular about it.
Hey Max, I'm having a problem with my name. It's still
Yep.
to the right of the page, to the left of the page. It's not moving over.
All right, share your screen, take a look.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm gonna request remote. And so get to the right section in my code. All right, get to the right section in your code. Just like on that center, line item center. And then we also did a oh, interesting. Okay. Each one, this should be maxed with 600 pixels. That did shrink it down, but it did not fix the centering issue. So let's add a text center up here. And that fixes it.
Yes, sir.
Your
Okay.
arrow is off as well. Let me see if you've got the CSS for that. That was arrow down. And this one, you are missing just a left position, which is a calc of 50% minus half the width of it. And now your arrow is all centered and good to go.
Yes, sir. 50%.
Anyone else need help? So I'm feeling pretty good about this. Scroll through your page, see if there's anything off, see if there's anything responsive wise. The last thing that we are going to touch on tonight is a little animation. And then tomorrow we will dive into the project pages.
Yes, sir. I'm also having another problem with my contact. It's all moved to the left of the screen.
All right, share screen. Say
It was
what?
on a mobile device. Yes, sir.
All right, press remote again. So for the contact section, right here, we have to say, hey, both of these are going to be 12 on smaller size screens. But on both of them, there'll be 6 on medium sized screens, and that fixes it.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's finish up with animations and get out of here for the evening. So if you go back to my example website and refresh it, you get this nice little load-in effect, right? And that is done with CSS animations. We touched on Animate CSS, I think, a tiny little bit with animate.css, but we can create those animations ourselves without having to use a library. In order to do that, what we do is we go down to our H1 that we're already targeting, and we say, hey, we're going to use an animation. That animation is called fade in. And we want to ease that animation in, and it should take 1 second. Now, if I save that and come back over and refresh my page, nothing happens. That is because fade in, the CSS doesn't know what fade in is. We actually have to build that animation so it knows how to fade something in using other CSS properties. In order to do that, we do this thing called keyframes. And a keyframe, if you've done any kind of video editing, is basically going frame by frame and applying a property that starts at one spot and ends at another. So keyframing is basically saying start here and end here. In order to do that, we say from start at a opacity of 0 and go to an opacity of 1. So if I save that, and I do have my fade in applied right, when it gets to this animation property, it goes fade in. What is fade in? Oh, I will use the keyframes to figure out how to fade in. What do I fade in from? Start from an opacity of 0. And what am I doing? Over 1 second, I am going to get to an opacity of 1. So if I save that, come over and refresh my page, I do get a little fade in going on here. Now, this animation property is really nice because we can kind of shorthand it, but we can also break that apart into several different properties. So if I go down to add another selector to my intro H3, I can kind of break this apart and I can say, hey, after 1 second of a delay, because I want it to load in after my name loads in, I still want to use my animation name of fade in. I want the animation for that one to take 2 seconds to run. And I want it to, fill in moving forward. Start with a 0 opacity, hit a 1 opacity. And if I save that, something weird kind of happens. my initial name fade in works, and then it goes, my second one disappears and reappears. Well, that's because we have the delay doesn't kick in until a second after the page loads. So I need to do one final thing. I need to say start at an opacity of 0 when the page first loads. When the page does first load, wait 1 second, then use my animation fade in, which is defined up here, and make it last for 2 seconds. So if I save that and come over here and refresh, I get my fade in effect working exactly the way I want. And the last thing we can do is make that apply to our code section. So we're going to borrow all of these properties here, paste it down into my code section, and then just adjust the delay to 3 seconds. And still set the opacity to 0. So there was a lot of new code there, but a lot of it was just copied and pasted. So we see how we can use shorthand for our animation. We see how we can apply different animation properties on the H3, and then we can adjust those for our code section as well. So if I save that and come over, we get our nice fade in effect, and we are done for the evening. So 3 examples of some animations we can do to get that fade in working. Sure, you can go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, I mean, I was basically, so you brought up the media tags still needing to follow like the inline order within the style sheet. Why is that? Shouldn't, like, is a better way to do it to break up every single size with a different media tag and have it in there? Why is media not overriding the rest of the styles?
All CSS, with some exceptions for specificity, will always cascade down. So whatever CSS you have at the end of the file will always be the thing that gets applied over top of whatever is above the file, above it in the file.
Okay. I guess I was thinking like, if you were specifying a specific screen size that you would want it to apply. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. You can just put it at the end, but
yeah, so it is common to put media queries at the end, so that you get all of your default styles applied, and then you get more specific. I tried to group them more based off of the content itself. But it really depends. So I try to avoid media queries at all costs and use the grid system as much as I can. However, that's not always possible, right? There are times where you go, all right, I can't fix this with layout. I need to make something smaller or adjust it. At which point, if you're doing a lot of media queries, it does make sense to kind of bunch them at the bottom of the page. And sometimes it makes sense to set up 3 or 4 media queries and make sure that none of them are overlapping before you start targeting out your styling.
right, because if you have like a one for an iPad, one for a desktop, and one for like a mobile phone, and then they're each doing like targeting the same IDs.
Correct.
It just seemed like a mess to deal with.
Sure is, which is why, like I said, I try to avoid them. But responsive web design gets messy in itself. And oftentimes why, if you are hiring a designer or a designer is providing mockups for you, it is a good idea to ask for the designs at 3 different screen sizes, at phone, tablet, and laptop, or desktop. Some people go nuts on that and will do extra small all the way through extra large. But I will say in the Bootstrap documentation, if you take a look under, I think it's layout breakpoints, they will give you the dimensions of their breakpoints, which can be really helpful to know kind of the way what Bootstrap targets. And then you can set up your own media queries to mirror that as well. Or you can say, hey, this is kind of overkill. I'm not going to do extra large and extra large. I'm just going to say if anything's over 992, it's got to be a pretty big screen. But you can mirror your app media queries to work with this.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions for the evening? How are we feeling about the portfolio site?
I really like it.
Hopefully we're starting
like
to
it.
see. Go ahead.
I like it a lot, but I just got a few things in the wrong spot.
Okay. I will let you guys sign off. It is officially 8:30. If your site is not working and you are tired and you would want to debug it tomorrow, that is totally fine. We will start with debugging in tomorrow morning's class. Or tomorrow morning, what am I talking about? At the beginning of tomorrow's class. However, if you have a couple minutes and need help debugging, I'm also happy to stick around and work on it now. Otherwise, have an awesome evening, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow.
Have a good night, everybody.
Oh man, Mac, you scared me, Mac. You scared me with that morning stuff. I'm like, oh crap, we're doing this in the morning. When?
9 a.m. Surprise! No. Tomorrow. But happy to help now as well. All right. Hazad, show me your site just so I've got an idea of what we're fixing.
Yes, sir. Oh, was it full screen? And then the site is, did I drag the wrong thing over here?
Maybe.
Yep, I dragged the wrong one. There it is.
Okay. Me request remote. All right, what are we trying to fix?
All right, in my style CSS, when we was adding in the other intro properties, I put a few things in the wrong spot. I noticed that I'm out of line and it's not getting the effects for the animation.
Okay. So the animation is you got your keyframe in, everything's right there. Then for the H1, your fade in is there. So let's see if that's working first. Okay, so that's working. So now we come down, we added in a selector for our H3. And then I'm totally gonna cheat. And do you have my code up?
No, sir.
Okay, never mind. I'm not gonna cheat. Couple properties we add here. We say animation delay.
I have it down at the bottom. You probably could copy and paste it. I have it right
Go for it.
here.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay, so the animation delay is just supposed to be 1 second, not 31 seconds.
Oh.
And then let me take out what I was just working on. Where did that go? Intro H3. Take mine out here. And then intro H3 is right there. All of that looks right. Okay, so let's see if that works. Nope. We are missing maybe an opacity. No, opacity is there. You don't have an H2, or you don't have an H3, you have an H2 instead.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So
Jesus.
if I target that one instead, now we get the animation and you're good to go.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anything else you need help with while I have you?
What else? I put a, let me see, animation code, arrow down. Everything seems to be everything seems to be good now.
Cool. Nice work.
Do you, hold on, I'm probably gonna book a meet and greet for that.
Okay. A one-on-one.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah.
Sounds good. Joey should have locked the door before you could get back in. What's your question?
Oh, too late. Okay, so instead of using it with like at media tags, can you just apply an entirely separate CSS file depending on screen size?
Not with native CSS. But then again, I didn't think that you could do nested selectors in native CSS, and apparently I was asleep at the wheel on learning new features. There is something called SAS, SASS, that we'll be learning once we get into React. SAS is a little bit harder to set up in non-React projects, totally doable and usually worth it for larger websites. But it adds in a bunch of features that CSS doesn't have natively, one of which was nested selectors, the other which is the ability to import other CSS files into your existing CSS file. And once you are able to do that, you are able to wrap media selectors in and basically say, hey, this is the mobile CSS file, this is the tablet CSS file, this is the desktop one. So I still don't believe it's possible. Oh, well, I guess you could do it with different link tags in your HTML and then just wrap everything in that file in one giant at media query. So I believe you still can't import other CSS files into your existing CSS file, but you could have multiple link tags in your head and link it out that way.
That was the way that I was thinking when I signed off. All right.
Yes. So totally possible to do that, at which case the order of the link tags would be basically the browser reads the CSS from top to bottom. So the order of the link tags would matter there instead of the order of the CSS in that file.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
I just have a quick question. You used a code tag, and I just wanted to know what that was essentially, or if it's just used for default settings. Because upon looking it up on Google, it had something to do with the default font setting, and I don't know. But if you just
it's basically just a fancy P tag that has some background set to it. It defaults the font family to monospace. I think those are the only two things. Maybe it puts a little bit of a border on it. I can't remember, but it's basically just a native HTML element that works just like a P tag with some styles set on it.
makes sense.
Final call for any questions tonight.
If I can just squeeze one more question in.
Yeah, go for it.
In your code, referring to line 140.
HTML or CSS?
HTML. Having to do with what I'm going to call or coin the HTML, the inline media query, wherein you use, you specify small or extra or whatever dimension that you'd like. So can you just explain that line essentially? Is it, for example, the call small 4, I don't know if you can just explain.
Yeah. So that's the responsiveness built into the Bootstrap grid system. I wouldn't call it quite an inline style media query because that's that would be like style equals quote and then doing it in there. But yeah, that is, I mean, it definitely is responsive, and Bootstrap is using media queries to make their grid system work. And so what it's basically doing is it's saying on small size screens or up, the column width should be 4. But on extra small screens, the column width should be 6. And so that can be really helpful for, hey, if I'm on a laptop size screen, I want to fit 3 of these columns across. If I'm on a tablet size, I only want to have 2 of the columns across. And then if I'm on a phone screen, I only want to have 1 column. So it's basically taking up the whole row. So what we're able to do there is specify multiple columns sizes based off of the overall screen dimension.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Yeah. And if I didn't explain that well, you can always head to the Bootstrap documentation. If you go to layout and grid, they give you like a breakdown here of the grid options and how the breakpoints work. And they kind of explain the different breakpoint sizes in here. They will also touch on breakpoints a little bit here. And then they kind of go into like the equal width of when we don't specify a size. And then they'll go into responsive mix and match, which is basically what we did here of saying, hey, we can get more specific and say for medium size, we want it to be a 4, otherwise default it to a 6.
I've noticed it's generally always on the parent class, correct? Like the parent as opposed to the child.
Yes. You can technically intermix, so you could put like the card right on the column. But oftentimes it makes more sense to nest it, not only for the layout of the card, but then also for the flexibility of saying like, oh, I want some text to show up in that column, but not necessarily in the card. So oftentimes when you're making a column, you want to do everything in the child of the column instead of trying to make your one div like over powerful kind of thing. Just more flexibility that way.
I think I had one just my code section disappeared. I'm not sure why.
Okay, share screen. Probably a problem. We got like the opacity set, but the animation isn't kicking in, maybe. Let me press remote. All right, so we still have your code section. We have code down here. Animation delay. We have, here we go. That should just be a 1, not a 1S.
Oh.
Did that fix it?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
There you go. No problem. All right. Well, have an awesome evening, everyone. I will see you guys tomorrow.
All right.
I have
go
another
ahead.
quick question. This is something I'm trying to get practice with. My sister was like, "Oh, since you want practice, try to build me a website for my daycare." So I was like, "All right, let me see what I could do." And I got my pictures to show up, but I just don't. I feel like now that I've learned about section, I could probably go about this all different. And because I was going to put this in a row. Let me share my screen and just talk about what I was going to try to do. That was probably all wonky. So I was going to, let me see. Oh, hold on. Kind of move this over. Boom. Okay, that's what I have mocked up so far. I was like, if I was to add a couple more pictures in there, but I wanted it to be like a drop down page, and this I was going to see how to add like a certain amount of effects, like to make it like spin into the screen or something like that. Search it up on YouTube.
Okay.
But I have you here, and I'm like, Okay, cool. That's cool. I was thinking about adding a nav bar up here, and in the
Okay.
nav bar, I wanted to put like you know, I don't know what that says. It's all messed up, but
So we're gonna do a nav bar in tomorrow's project page, so you will get a little experience with the nav bar there. I would highly recommend though that you do at least a wireframe, or if not a mock-up, right? Because it's really easy to get caught up in our code. You will notice every project that we have created, I haven't just been like, oh, we're just gonna throw a section in here, right? I've always had an example of either another website that was already made, or we had a screenshot of the mock-up, or we had something, right? And so
yes,
the part of the brain that does visual layout is a very different part of the brain that does hierarchical code. And it's really hard for both of those parts of the brain to engage at the same time. So what I would really recommend is either on a whiteboard or on a piece of notebook paper, or go into Figma if you're more of a digital person, lay out the website. Because that's really going to help you understand, oh, this is a div, or I need a container here, or oh, these rows are going to go down the page, or it's really easy to go, oh, I want a nav bar, and then you got to go, well, what are the links going to be in the nav bar? And so by thinking that out in the design phase will make it really easy to implement on the coding section.
got you. All right, that makes a lot of sense. 'Cause I'm trying to do this from scratch. I don't even know what I'm doing.
All
You
right,
know,
one more
okay.
little simple question I have, please. Just I want to know like the difference. Like, all right, so we would have to, in order to build this site right here that we did, sections was the best way to go about it, or could we have just like use divs to
Totally.
divide each out?
Yeah, totally could have used divs. Divs would have worked exactly the same way. We would have had to say div in our CSS instead of saying section, but divs would have worked exactly the same way. And that goes for most semantic elements. So we use footer instead of a div down there. We could have used a div and that would have worked exactly the same way. The two benefits of semantic elements are, one, screen readers for accessibility know what is inside the content. So it's not just a generic div. They go, oh, I understand that whatever is inside of this is actually going to be, footer content. And then the other benefit of it is, instead of having to say div ID footer, we could just target the footer directly in our CSS. So those are really the only two benefits, but we could have used divs, and divs would have worked exactly the same way if we also targeted the CSS to update that.
Okay, I guess I just want to know like the pros and cons of that. That makes sense.
Yeah, in general, if you can use semantic HTML, it is definitely preferred, but it is definitely not a requirement. The site could look exactly the same without using them and just using divs instead.
Okay, that sums it up. That'll do it.
All right. Have
Thank
a
you.
good
Yeah,
night, guys.
good question,
All right,
man.
thank you. You too, Max.
You as well.